I was born under the wide, watchful sky of Washington, D.C., in a row house that still smelled faintly of my grandmother's jasmine. Please subscribe my channel. They called our neighborhood quiet, polite, polished, the sort of place where secrets hid behind curtains and law books lined the shelves like witnesses. My name is Amelia, and for most of my life the largest, ugliest secret sat at our dining room table. My older brother Marcus, with his easy grin and practiced outrage, had spent years trying to erase me from the ledger of our father's estate. He wanted the house. He wanted the title, the key, the little brass mailbox that our father had fixed every spring. I wanted what was mine by blood and by right, and if I am honest, I wanted a reckoning that tasted like both justice and something a little sweeter. For a long time I planned quietly. Revenge is, I learned, a delicate craft. It needs patience, imagination, and the kind of humility that keeps you from burning down everything you love. I rehearsed my anger like an aria, soft under my breath, explosive when the time came. I read statutes and wills, watched him at family gatherings as he polished his stories, watched how he smiled to make the audience forget the clause. He believed himself untouchable, because people confuse boldness with innocence. He had forgotten that laws, like hearts, are fragile when someone understands how to read them. Then I met Jonah. He was not the instrument of my vengeance. He was a pause, an unexpected, stubborn pause in the sentence I had been writing with my life. Jonah worked at the bookstore on M Street, a narrow place of paperback solace where the air smelled of coffee and rain. He sold me a copy of a legal treatise I pretended to understand and handed me a battered novel that, he promised, would change the way I saw the city. He had ink on his fingers and a laugh that made me want to tell him everything and nothing at all. Soon, our conversations stretched from the small, favorite authors, the best bench in the park, to the dangerous, family, grief, the weight of expectations. Jonah had his own scars. He knew what it was to be underestimated, to be noticed only when convenient. That recognition tightened something in me. It was not a plan at first. It was the beginning of a life that could include more than a ledger entry. Still, Marcus kept pushing. His threats arrived as polite emails, as unsolicited offers of buyouts, as nights when he would stop by under the pretense of checking on the house and leave with an air of ownership like cologne. I could have run, could have signed away my share out of weariness. But the house smelled of my childhood, and the mailbox had my father's handprint worn into the brass. I refused. Jonah became my confidant. He listened without offering the quick fixes men often do. Instead, he taught me to see my situation from angles I had not considered. How publicity could be a tool, how a single, well-placed witness mattered more than 1,000 accusations shouted into the wrong room. He suggested a journalist friend who loved court dramas and a young, fierce attorney who believed the law could be poetry. We made our strategy like people make soup, slow, careful, full of things that complemented one another. There were documents to unearth, a hasty amendment Marcus had forged, signatures traced with the clumsy enthusiasm of a man convinced of his own invincibility. There were neighbors to interview, a gardener who remembered nocturnal moves of boxes, a bank teller with a memory like a ledger. Jonah sat by my side through depositions and late-night emails, his presence a steadying thing. When my voice shook, he offered coffee and the blunt, necessary truth. Vengeance without an exit plan can leave you with nothing but an empty victory. The headlines, when they came, were kinder than I expected. The journalist wrote with the clarity of someone who had learned to love the messy human stakes beneath legalese. Marcus's forged amendment unraveled under scrutiny. His allies, once ready to sign in the dark, revealed their discomfort in the light. The court did not need melodrama, only evidence and the patience to present it. When the judge read the ruling, it felt like the house itself exhaled. But the real surprise was not the court's decision. It was the way the city seemed to watch me differently afterward, as if Washington, which prides itself on precedent and performance, recognized that a woman could claim both her right and her dignity. Marcus left that night with the kind of face you see on men who have lost not just money, but the illusion of control. He called me before he packed his last box, voice small. He asked, haltingly, for something I had never expected to offer: an apology. I nearly refused. Vengeance taught me to be stern and clever, but love had been teaching me something softer: how mercy could be a different kind of power. Jonah's hand found mine in the courthouse hallway, a quiet anchor amid flashes and murmurs. I thought of my father's slow smile, the way he had loved both his children in ways that were messy and imperfect. I thought of the jasmine in the yard, and the creak of the back stairs that remembered our childhood games. I realized that what I truly wanted was not to break my brother, but to reclaim a life that belonged to me. So I met him at the kitchen table where we had argued for years. He fumbled with his apology. It was clumsy and sincere in equal parts, the kind of human thing that bruises but can also heal. I listened. I told him, simply, that he had taken too much from me already. I told him that my forgiveness would not be cheap, that it would live inside boundaries and bank accounts and the quiet enforcement of law. I offered him, instead, a path out of the man he had been, a chance to make amends in ways that mattered. Jonah watched me negotiate that strange thing: justice dressed in compassion. After Marcus left with what dignity he could salvage, I returned to the little row house that smelled of jasmine and proof that history could be rewritten. The house was mine not because I had plotted alone, but because I had chosen allies and the law, and, in the end, mercy. Romance, for me, was never a simpler substitute for power. It was the introduction that made my life legible in new fonts. Jonah and I discovered how to build a life that fit both our ambitions: mornings with coffee and legal briefs, afternoons wandering museums, nights spent reading to each other until the neighbor's lights winked out. He loved my sharp edges. I loved his patient curiosity. We argued sometimes. Oh, we argued with the ferocity of two people who no longer needed to perform their pain to be seen, but we also forgave each other with the ease of people who had chosen love over spectacle. The revenge I had craved tasted different than I expected. It was not a feast of retribution, but a quiet meal shared at a kitchen table I now owned. It came with the knowledge that I had taken my life back without losing my soul. It came with a man who kept his promises and a city that knew my name. People ask, sometimes, if I regret the path I chose. The late nights, the public scrutiny, the decision to fight rather than to flee. I tell them no. I tell them that love and revenge are not always opposites. Sometimes they are a strange, necessary duet. I tell them that the sweetest victories are those that allow you to open your front door and breathe, and to do so with someone who will hand you the other key when you forget it on the kitchen counter. On warm nights, when the jasmine blooms and the city hums like an old radio, Jonah and I sit on the stoop and listen. The house keeps its stories in the walls, and sometimes, if you press your ear to the wood, you can hear a chorus of small, ordinary triumphs. A sister reclaimed, a brother learning to be less certain, two people finding that the right kind of love can be both shelter and sword. Thanks watching my video.